Hello YouTube, Chrisiosity here, and today I'm going to do a video that's been on my radar for quite a while on the Twitter account called Real Peer Review. So who is Real Peer Review, or RPR as I'll call them, and why do we care? Here's their self-description. New at Real Peer Review with blackjack and intelligent, evidence-respecting academic peers. Complaint should be filed with Machine Priestess at OK Naomi Use Facts. They are a group Twitter account with around 53,000 subscribers. They describe themselves as satirizing social sciences, which they do most of the time by just posting brief excerpts taken from various studies or articles or think pieces, and they'll highlight a few sentences from an out-of-context screenshot and then frame this with lol or emojis or little sarcastic comments like groundbreaking. So I guess you could say this is like the Nelson Muntz school of satire, just pointing and laughing, ha ha. They don't provide counter-arguments or really specify what the issues they're trying to highlight are. It's just the impression of, this is so stupid. And by cherry-picking various sources they don't like, they're trying to give an impression to people that social science is overwhelmed with kooks. Now, the logical problem with this, right from the get-go, should be obvious. Cherry-picking from a huge cherry orchard. Social science is not a small territory to cover. You want to find something silly here, you will. And if that was all it was, that would be obnoxious enough. But they are far more fallacious and dishonest than that, as I will show. The other issue is that they are used as ammunition by right-wing speakers and have been retweeted by people like Jordan Peterson and even claimed as a source by those looking to back up alarmist claims of the horrible and terrifying state of affairs in academia. Postmodernists, Marxists, and betas, oh my. So what do? I've taken a few examples of their content to show some of the ways they go about being, well, dishonest right-wing shills. It's hard because a lot of these are behind a paywall for me, and so I can't evaluate them even on my own layperson's terms. But let's take a look at a couple of simple examples. Now, as I went through these things, a couple of themes were apparent. If you were talking about race or gender and used pop culture in any way to talk about those things, then you are just ridiculous and they can't stand it. One example from the Journal of Popular Culture: Race, Citizenship, and the Politics of Alien Abduction, or Why Aliens Do Not Abduct Asian Americans, written by Lucas Tromley and published in 2017. Now, the satirical RPR suggests that this paper is about how Asian people are discriminated against by not being abducted by aliens, but that is not the case. From reading the abstract, which is all I can afford, it is apparent that what this guy is talking about is something I didn't know. These alien abduction stories that people have been telling for decades are mostly an American phenomenon. They happen occasionally in other English-speaking countries and rarely in other parts of the globe. And I suspect that if I could read the rest of the paper, I would find out that even in America, people from certain cultural backgrounds claim abduction most often. Like Lucas Tromley, I find this interesting. But I find a lot of weird stuff like this interesting from a human, psychological, and narrative perspective in any case. And me and my buddy Lucas here, we're not alone. Carl Jung, one of the two major founders of psychology, wrote a book on it. Freud may have been all about listening to the butt dreams of neurotic Victorians, but Jung found alien encounters more interesting and wrote about them as modern myths and ways of maybe processing anxieties about nuclear proliferation, that sort of thing. There's a whole conference on it as well at MIT in the early 90s. So I guess my point is that intellectually curious people will always want to know why stuff is the way it is. It's kind of one of the main engines of intellectual and scientific developments. Here's another example. These ones I picked out of a string of satirical posts about a paper called Trans Objects: Materializing Queer Time in U.S. Transmasculine Homes by Max J. Andrucki and Dana J. Kaplan. This one is right up RPR's wheelhouse. There's academic jargon in this paper, for sure, and it's about queer people, so therefore it's garbage? Well, maybe it is. I can't afford to read it, and RPR just screenshots bits and pieces, but from what I gather, they went into the homes of trans men who were at various stages of transitioning and talked to them and looked at their stuff. And they were looking at the ways they marked time in their own private spaces while in transition. I'm going to put up the abstract, and if you want to read through it, just pause it for a second and go ahead. There. So, some of this is written in pure academicese, and I'm not fluent, and other parts I totally get. Either way, I don't assume that jargon means that they aren't saying something important any more than legalese means there's nothing important in the contracts you sign. It's one of those things where we always say that we prefer people to speak for clarity, but I worked in the medical field, so I know sometimes jargon happens, especially when you are speaking to other people who you assume know the same jargon that you do and can follow it. I remember, for instance, being in a waiting room somewhere, and the Today Show was on, and they were talking about Princess Kate Middleton when she was pregnant, and they were all like, she has hyperemesis gravidarum. Like it was some dramatic diagnosis, and I laughed out loud a little bit. And people are all like looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? But literally that's just Latin for pukes a lot while pregnant. And now if you're a doctor and a nurse and you're talking to each other, they would know between the two of them what you meant. But the Today Show people were just clutching their pearls. Oh my god, she has hyperemesis gravidarum. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take that seriously. And pregnant women who have this condition, it's a severe form of morning sickness. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It's totally beside the point. The point here is that jargon kinda sucks, and it's kind of everywhere, but it certainly exists in science and academia regardless of the specific field, and you shouldn't fall into the trap of, well, if I don't understand this, it must be bullshit, because that doesn't logically follow, my friends. So I won't make you go through all of their tweets on this. Most of them are of the point and derp variety, but I'll throw out a couple that show their biases and dishonesty well. This one, as you can see, is a picture of vials and needles and such that reads, as far as we can tell because it's cut off. John explains that this set of objects serves for him as a way to mark time, a static yet constantly expanding collection of objects through which he tracks his transition. And our friends at RPR, they are so sassy. They say, John needs a visit from the Fab Five. Oh, snap. But very frequently I see this where if you think about whatever RPR is putting out there for more than 5 seconds, you end up with, what the hell is your problem? A guy is going through the long, intensive process of transitioning, and he likes to have his old vials on display in the privacy of his own home, so that when it comes time to stick yet another needle into his body, not a pleasant event for anyone, he can look at how far he's come along on this process. I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and guess that is more of a priority at this phase of his life than his decor. And again, I get why the authors care, because this is exactly what they're writing about, but why the hell does RPR care? What does this have to do with anything? Here's another one from this series. They write, feeling threatened by intruders of your safe space calling you on the phone? Not psychotic at all. But if you look at what they are referencing, well, first, I don't know why they put intruders of your safe space in quotes, because that is not a quote from here. The authors start out talking about a halfway house called Transy House. Halfway houses are not the same as safe spaces on college campuses. They are places designed for people who, for various reasons, maybe recovery from drug addiction or mental illness, need a highly structured space to reintegrate into society. But that isn't even where the phone comes up, because the authors changed the topic to a different study by someone named Doan, where they're talking about pre-transition individuals and how they often make their homes into a private place where they can just be themselves and don't have to pretend. And then they just point out that while that can be a relief, it's not a perfectly private space. You could still have your uber Christian auntie calling you to read Bible passages, or people calling and misgendering you or whatever. And no, just noting that is reality is not psychotic. It's the opposite of psychotic. It's reality. That's how that works. So I guess I need to explain that my understanding of satire is that it takes something and exaggerates it or shows the inherent ridiculousness of it in some way, but this is just lying about it. And I don't know that that is satire, especially since this doesn't point out anything about the target of the satire. Because when you base it on lies, you're just making fun of your own lies. And that seems like, unless you're satirizing yourself, in which case real peer review are meta-satirical geniuses, because they are fantastic at the cell phone. I don't know. And in case you think it's only the social sciences whose conclusions they don't like, no. When an expert on psychology and health mentions that severe or frequent stress represses the immune system, for instance, RPR had this to say. Oh dear snowflakes and their precious immune systems. Now, I don't know what they're mocking here exactly. Whether it's the fact that humans respond to stress physically, or that the immune system is precious to people, because most people want to avoid things like illness and premature death, in as much as that is possible, and the immune system is the thing that allows you to do that. But in either case, these are very much well-evidenced positions. Now, based on the portion they chose to highlight, I'm guessing that RPR takes umbrage at the fact that experiencing racism, sexism, or other issues like that are stressful and lead to depressed immune systems, but this is also not a controversial opinion at all for those that study these things. As you can see from the screenshot, the author of the paper cites multiple sources for this, which elicit brilliant satirical commentary such as, "Here we go," and "Ha ha ha" from RPR. Listen, if you really are a proponent of facts over feels, you should be against this kind of thing. But now, what are they really doing? These people are cowards. They won't show you the entirety of their references, or reference things you could read for yourself, even if you wanted to, in many cases. They won't tell you the truth about what they post, or differentiate between opinion pieces and scientific studies. The vast majority of journals have some kind of mix, but they shouldn't be judged in the same way. They won't be honest about their ideological agendas and biases, which are pretty clear from their choices, but because they don't just say what they mean, it gives them the chance to play innocent. What, us? Political, ideological biases? No, not us. They're cowards. They tear down what is often months of work for other people, and they themselves put in less effort or thought than Ken Ham, for Christ's sakes. Originally, when I was writing this, I wanted to call them the CinemaSins of peer review, but CinemaSins makes actual arguments you could point to or dispute. You can't argue with RPR, because you can't argue with lol, rawful, ha ha ha. There's no way to do that. And they aren't really satire either. That's just the word that they use to get out of being criticized, because that's the thing that some people do now. But if you've ever watched actual satire, people make points. They may not all be of equal quality, but the whole idea is to provide some sort of incisive commentary to show you why something is wrong, not to just point and derp. That is nothing. Of course, part of RPR's problem, part of the reason that they can't do this well, is because a lot of the stuff they write about has nothing wrong with it. I'm going to try to be charitable now and talk about the couple of things that I kind of get where they're coming from. For instance, I can sort of understand the idea that studying things like reality TV shows, fandoms, or porn comes off as silly. It is silly. They are studying humans and human culture. Humans are silly. It's like, okay, back in Victorian times, there was a fashion for conchology, the study of shells. There were societies dedicated to it. The problem with conchologists of the time was that they didn't really appreciate mollusks, because slimy. Yeah, sometimes it's just the shells were easier to come by and preserve, but it didn't really matter, even if they were right there on the beach. They just ignored that. Shells, beautiful, intricate, iridescent. Mollusks, slimy, spongy, edible. But you can't really study the one without the other. They are literally connected, just different parts of the same organisms. And you could apply this to humans. If you want to study human behavior and culture, society, you got to study all of it. The pretty shell parts and the slimy mollusk parts. I'm sure RPR would prefer it if we all just called them up and asked them first what types of observable phenomenon we're allowed to think about or ask questions about. But that's crap, and it's no way to advance knowledge. The truth is, you often don't know what areas of research will produce the greatest dividends and which will be blind alleys. The only way to find out is to look. The other thing that I see that they have a problem with is autoethnography, a form of qualitative research in which the author uses self-reflection and writing to explore their personal experience and connect the autobiographical story to wider cultural, political, and social meanings and understandings. This is sort of understandable as well if you were looking at this from in the way that they seem to, as if people are out there trying to actually just totally replace the norms of the scientific method. But instead, as with most qualitative research, they are trying to figure out how to examine subjective reality, and that's a difficult project at best. Autoethnography is controversial. It is not used to make wide claims. It's used because many of the things that people are going to look at are subjective and cannot be measured, but they are nevertheless important. Should they therefore be ignored? Should huge, sweeping areas of experience be tossed out with no analysis whatsoever because it can't be measured like a chemical formula? These aren't easy questions, but when they use things like this as a supplement, rather than a replacement to quantitative research, it seems like a good way to deepen our understandings. Alright, so now that I've said those things, that is as much credit as I can give real peer review, and it's more than they deserve or would grant to anyone else. Because like I said, a lot of the articles they highlight literally have nothing wrong with them. You don't like articles about porn? Okay, prudish, but I at least get it. But here's one about Truman Capote, major American author who wrote in the Southern Gothic tradition. They're talking about his story, A Lamp in a Window, about an old lady who kept her deceased cat friends in a freezer so she could be close to them. And Capote wrote a rather tender story about her. But you know, Southern Gothic tradition. You want normal stories about normal people having normal lives? Well, I honestly don't know what genre that is, but I do know Capote is not your guy. But you can hardly say that literary types shouldn't talk about him. He's kind of a big deal in that area. And if you were to read the story, their take on it is hardly out of left field. But you know, I picked this because it was in front of me, but I could easily give you 10 more examples of stuff with nothing wrong with it if I wanted to be here all day. And I don't. So for those of you playing along at home, you may have started to notice a pattern. The pattern is not, as they would want you to believe, that they pick bad articles and studies. I'm sure they do sometimes. The law of averages says sometimes they must, but lots of other times they pick stuff that's fine. One actual pattern, though, is they don't like queer stuff. They don't like lady stuff or black stuff all that much either. And those things are a lot more consistent than any issue they have with quality. These people are simply and fairly obviously trying to ride a Trojan horse of right-wing crap into the discourse, and they succeed at it because people that share their biases tend to like them. They aren't doing much of anything different than anti-science or anti-intellectual right-wingers of any stripe. Creationists, climate change deniers, any of them. They look to the people who present evidence that goes against their worldview and their base life assumptions and try to paint them as somehow dishonest, like they're all in on some sort of conspiracy, or just making shit up to be politically correct, or some dumbass thing like that. So, to all the supposedly skeptical types out there who occasionally enjoy looking at RPR because it gives you a little boost in your bias zone, I get it. I actually do. I know that sometimes you're just like, ugh, I just want somebody to come along and make fun of stuff that I don't like. That's just human. But you gotta stop if you care about rationality, intellectual inquiry, or science. The same game they play against academia and social sciences here can, and has, and will be played against any of the hard sciences as well. You can point a derp at anything. It's not difficult to do, to go, ha ha ha, this is stupid. And this has never been about science. It's not about evidence or any of the actual problems in peer review, which are multiple and serious and come in all kinds of scientific fields. But these guys don't give any actual fucks. This is about politics. This is about a large and growing body of evidence that our society is not just to great numbers of people based on traits and identities that they don't get to choose. These unfortunate, inconvenient facts and the moral burden it places on people of conscience to do something to improve the situation has a way of making people feel very uncomfortable or feel like their own position in society might be under siege, so they would rather deny reality. And for that, groups like RPR are here to provide them some cover. Now, for the leftists, it's important to take a look at these people to know the game that they play because it's such a common one in right-wing circles. These people cannot back their own worldview with sound arguments and evidence. Their ideas would never themselves pass peer review. In fact, they often won't even admit to their own ideas because they know it won't go over. And it's a lot easier to go, but look at these people. These people are so stupid. For another instance, you could take Ben Shapiro. Have you ever read his rules on how to debate leftists and destroy them? If you have, you will have noticed that make logically cogent arguments with sound, evidence-based points is not a part of that plan. It's all get in fast, be aggressive, mocking, land some low blows, and get out as fast as you can. They explicitly want to end the argument as quickly as possible, and with bonus points if they can make you look annoyed or frustrated with them in the process, because then they can put up a video that says, oh, look at this person who got wrecked. Couple things to be clear about. I'm not trying to tell people so that you can adopt their strategies, because ultimately that's a losing proposition. It's just that you should know that this might be coming so that you're prepared for it. And the only other quick caveat here is that real peer review has said on multiple occasions that people have tried to hack them or tried to dox them and not been successful, or that people have sent veiled threats to them, whatever that means. And so just don't do that. That sucks. That's not the way to go about this. Anyway, so thank you all for listening and for checking out these people. Be on your guard against these types and people like them and the kind of crap that they do. That's all I gotta really say. If you like this video, a little thumbs up or subscribe if you haven't. Hit that little bell, that does help little content creators like me. I would like to thank all of my patrons: Mike Yoakum, Faustin Talacha, Jordy, Brad Savvy, Daniel Jones, Kevin Thurber, Some Random Geek, Nikki Paprika, Andre Rodriguez, Joanna Carvalho, Nick Hayden, Jesse Wynn, Marie Deanne, Bruce Bartup. Hey Bruce! I haven't talked to you in a while. If you would like to be a patron too, the link is below. Thank you, everybody! Bye!